In this video, I'll be sharing with you a requested tutorial on how to cut this stylish Halterneck keyhole mermaid dress. So if this is something you like, kindly hit on the subscribe button. And this dress is from Hellas Couture on TikTok. So to start, here is my pattern, and I've gone ahead to mark out the basic measurement for the upper part of this dress, which is the shoulder to bust, under bust, waist and blouse length. So I'm cutting this in form of an inbuilt dress, inbuilt halter neck dress. Now if you look at the picture, you notice that's what we have. Now first, go ahead and mark your shoulder divided by 2 and come down by 1 inch. Now after marking that, I'll mark my neckline of 3 inches, basic neckline of 3 inches, which I'll connect. The next step is to go ahead to find my chest line, and to find my chest line is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5. I made a mark there and I drew out a straight line. Now go ahead to place back your shoulder divided by 2. I'll mark at that point and then go ahead to connect it upwards. So after this, I'm going to place my tape and I'll divide what I have here into 2. Now I'm going to mark the bust circumference divided by 4 on my chest line. Now from here, I'll come in by ½ inch. What I'll do is I'll place my ruler and I'll connect from that point to the ½ inch and all the way to the upper part of my pattern. Now after I'm done doing this, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead to mark out a basic neckline. So for this neckline, sorry, when you're marking yours, please go ahead to use 3 by 2.5 inches, right? Don't use 3 by 3 inches, use at least 3 by 2.5 or 2.8 by 2.5. Now I'm going to start marking my darts. I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. Now I'm going to mark this all the way to the lower part of my pattern. After marking this, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw out a straight line connecting this all the way to the lower part of my pattern. So next, I'll mark ½ inch at the front and 1.5 here. Now I'll also repeat it here, ½ inch here, 1.5. Let's say you're a plus size, you're a lot bigger or you're a bit busty, you're going to use 1 inch here and then 2 inches on the other side of this pattern. Now after marking that, you want to go ahead to connect from the bust to the under bust, but go ahead to outline. So after this, I'll place my curve drill, connect it up, and I will repeat this at the other side of my pattern also. Now after I'm done doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to connect. So at the armhole of my dress, what I'm going to do is to go ahead to divide what I have here into 2. Now I'm going to go ahead to place my curve drill and I'm going to connect this to the armhole of my dress. After I'm done connecting it, I'm going to mark ½ inch on both sides of my pattern. So after I'm done marking this, I'm going to go ahead to blend this down. After I'm done blending at this point, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead to outline it. Now I'm going to extend one side of this dart. This is because when you're joining your princess dart bustier, the middle tends to be longer. So I'll replace the 1 inch dart at the armhole of the dress and then I'll connect it back to my armhole. Now after I'm done connecting this, I'll outline this. Now the next step is to alter this pattern to get what we want, right? Before then, I'll insert my measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. My bust is 33 inches divided by 4. I'll mark, then measure this dart intake of 1 inch and replace and add my sewing allowance. So for this dress, you might not use too much sewing allowance because it's cut as an inbuilt dress. At the under bust, I'll mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. Pick this dart intake, replace and add just ½ inch for the sewing allowance. Or you can use 1 inch, but don't use too much sewing allowance. My under bust and the waist is the same measurement, so I just marked my waist measurement and I replaced the darts, added the sewing allowance. So here I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. So next I'll just go ahead to connect. So just like I said, this dress is cut like an inbuilt dress. You can go ahead and make it without too much sewing allowance, because when you're making an inbuilt dress, it doesn't really have any much sewing allowance, unless you want to add like at least 1.52 inches to your pattern. So next I'm going to mark my bust dart, and to get your bust dart is the difference between your shoulder to waist in front and your shoulder to waist at the back. My shoulder to waist in front is 17, while at the back is 15.5. So go ahead to measure yours. After measuring your own, minus what you have from the back from the front, so that difference is what you mark as your bust dart. So from the lower part, I will go up by 2 inches. Now I'll go ahead to blend this out. This is to avoid the side being so long. Now if you don't want to cut this as an inbuilt corset, I'm also going to cut this as a 2-in-1 pattern, right? And for this pattern, I will make one a basque, then cut one as an inbuilt dress. So whichever one that suits you, please go ahead to use that, because in some cases some people find it difficult to make their dress as an inbuilt dress. So I'm going to be giving it a basque waistline later. So from the neckline, I'll come down by 1 inch and I will connect. So blend in your dart. Then when you're marking, please go out a bit by ½ inch after the actual line, so that when you're joining, in case you have a shortage by the side, it will still meet up. Like sometimes when you're joining a princess dart, the center part tends to be slightly longer, so that extra ½ inch is just in case. Now I'll just go ahead and measure at least 1 inch, and I'll go down ½ inch after my bust. So after marking this, I realized that the opening I had here was quite much, so I went ahead to like try to readjust it. When you're working on your own, and if you don't feel that this opening I have here is much, please go ahead to readjust it. So you can see me trying to like reduce the opening I have there. So now what you need is to go ahead to measure the neckline of this dress. You need it to cut out the part that you're going to replace as the collar of this dress. So after measuring, what I have is 5 inches. Now I'll now go ahead to cut out this part. Now that 5 inches, you'll be cutting out the back neckline, but in this case the back is actually backless, right? But for a basic back pattern, the back neckline is usually 3.5, so we'll still be cutting that out. So I'll just go ahead and cut out the remaining part of my pattern. Please go ahead to blend out this side to make sure it matches. Now I'll now go ahead to cut out the remaining part of this dress. So you know this dress is an inbuilt dress. You're going to create the basque effect with your skirt. That is after you're done making your skirt. So if you don't want it as an inbuilt corset, go ahead to come in by the waistline and then draw out your basque this way. Like blend up your pattern before going ahead, then you can now cut it out. But on the actual dress, is actually an inbuilt dress. So now I'm going to cut the back. So for the back, I'll just make it backless. Now what you also need is the back neckline to know what you're going to have there, right? So for the back neckline, it is usually around 3.5 inches if you measure it round. So now what you are going to do is to go ahead to start marking our pattern. So I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2, come down by 1 inch. So already on my pattern, I marked my measurement, which is my shoulder to bust, waist and blouse length. Remember, my shoulder to waist in front is 17. Now my shoulder to waist at the back is 15.5, and I added extra 5 inches just like we did for the blouse length of the front. For an inbuilt corset or an inbuilt dress, you add 5 inches after your waistline. So I went ahead to mark my shoulder, my chest line, just like we did for the front pattern. Now I'll make the back a dartless pattern where I'll mark the bust circumference divided by 4 and add the sewing allowance. On the waist, I'll mark the waist circumference divided by 4 and also add a sewing allowance. At the blouse length, I'll mark the waist circumference divided by 4 plus the sewing allowance. So how we got the back length is your shoulder to waist plus 5 inches. That is your shoulder to waist in at the back plus 5 inches. While for the front is your shoulder to waist at the front plus 5 inches. That is how to mark for an inbuilt dress. So after I'm done marking that, the next step I'll take is to come in for the lacing area. Now I'll use like about 3 inches or 3.5, because if you notice the back is very open, and if you feel that it's not that open, you can go ahead to readjust it. Now I'll draw out a straight line here, so there's no need marking my dart and going through all that process. We are keeping the back very simple. Now I'll come down by 1/2 inch so that the lacing bar will not be hanging up or popping. Sorry, the lacing area will not be hanging or popping up. Now I'll reconnect it back to the chest line, and this is just the back pattern of the dress. Now I'll go ahead to connect. Now for the neckline of the back, we are using a basic neckline of 3 by 1 inch. And when you measure a basic neckline of 3 by 1 inch, you always get 3.5. And remember, the neckline of the front we measured is 5 inches. So go ahead to also measure your own neckline for the front. You're going to add up the front neckline and the back neckline for you to cut out the turtle neckline that you're going to place at the back of at the neckline of the dress. So from here I went up by 2 inches, sorry, and I'll go ahead to connect it down. This is how to like cut an inbuilt blouse back. Now it's not going to like get all the way down so that you'll be comfortable to sit down. Now if you're making this dress in form of a basque, now we're going to cut it from the waistline. Remember, at the front I cut out two methods: the one that has a basque and the one that is an inbuilt. So if you're using for the basque, the waistline will stop at the waist, like it's not going to extend all the way down. Now for the skirt pattern, I'm going to make it in a miniature size because the skirt is actually very long. Now the first thing you need to mark is waist to hip point, which is 7 inches, or unless you're marking for a taller person, you use it. Then mark your waist to knee point. Measure from your waist to knee point and mark. Now at this point, you're just going to go ahead to like outline those parts. That is your hip, that is your waist hip measurement, your hip line, sorry, your knee line, and your skirt length. So at the waist, you mark your waist circumference divided by 4 and add a sewing allowance, which I've already marked. Here you mark your hip circumference divided by 4 and add your sewing allowance. You can use any sewing allowance of your choice. Now on the hip line, that measurement you have on your hip, minus 2 inches from it and mark it on your knee line. Unless you don't want it to be that fitted, you use 1.5. That is the hip measurement plus your sewing allowance. Deduct 2 inches from it and mark it on your knee. After that, after your knee line, go up by 2 inches, like mark 2 inches. Now that measurement you have on your knee, you transfer it to that 2 inches line you went up from, and you're going to connect from the waist to the hip point, and from the hip point all the way to that 2 inches first. This is to like give the dress like this fitted look, coming down like towards the hip area, because your body is not really straight, is a bit curvy towards that side. Now we will now go ahead and connect it all the way to your skirt length. So I forgot to mention the measurement for folding your skirt. You can use like 18 inches on fold, or you can use your hip circumference divided by 4 plus extra 6 or 8 inches, depending on how full you want it to be. And you're going to go ahead to connect. Now I'm done cutting out this pattern, which is the front pattern, right? Front pattern of the skirt. Now let's go ahead and cut the back. So for this mermaid skirt, there are different ways of cutting it. So I'll be showing you two methods, this one and the other one, but this one might be easier for you. Now place your skirt and you're going to trace out the shape you have at the back towards the front, towards the middle part where you're going to have a zipper. That is where you're going to have your train on. So I had to just replace this on another pattern paper, right? So if you notice, I gave space at the front. So when you're placing it on your fabric, you can give at least 10 to 20 inches in front of this area. This is the part where you'll be adding the train. So when you mark this, I'm just going to go ahead to trace it out. Now I'll just take it out. This is your skirt. So I'm just showing you that you're going to place your skirt on another fabric add extra inches to it. Now take note of that point that we went up by 2 inches from the knee, right? Now you're now going to add your zipper allowance. You can use 1.5 2 inches for your zipper allowance, whatever that is okay for you. So from this point now, I'll go down by ½ inch and reconnect it at the waist. This is so that the zipper will not pop up at the back of your skirt, like for an inbuilt corset. Now from here, you now extend this all the way down. So you can stop at the actual length of the skirt, but if you want it to have a very long train at the lower part, you go ahead to extend it at least 10 15 20 inches now, but that will cost you like extra fabric. So what you now do is from there, you make sure that the end is meeting, then you now connect it to the center this way and make sure that you blend it out very well. Now what you do is you're going to go ahead to cut this out. So after cutting this out, I'll just go ahead and trace out this side also. So this is what the back pattern of the skirt will be looking like. So you now have a very long train at the back. Now place your front at the back. You notice the sides are meeting, right? Now you can now choose a side that you're going to open to create that curve that you have in front of your skirt this way, whether it's the right side or the left side of your skirt. Now moving over to the second method, what I'll do is place back my pattern on the fabric and I'll go ahead to trace out the sides. So when tracing out, I'm going to stop at that point where I have that zipper. I'll make a mark there. So now for this method, what you're going to do is you're going to like have an extension that will be going all the way straight down. So this totally depends on how long you want it to be also. But first, I'll go ahead to add like my zipper allowance at the upper part of my skirt and also go down by ½ inch and I will reconnect this to the upper part. Now from here, there are two methods of doing this. You can either measure from what you have from this point now to the actual length of your skirt, and then you will now take it round and draw it out. But if you want your train to be longer, what you have to do is you're not going to use the actual length. You're going to like increase it. That way it will be longer. So even if this will be looking like it's on a straight line, this point of the skirt, by the time you cut it out, you know it's a fabric, so it's going to come down. So what you do is that measurement, you place it and trace it round as if you're drawing out a flare, like a semicircle, and you connect. That is if you're using the actual length of your dress, right? But if you don't want to use the actual length, you can make the lower part longer. You can make the lower part longer and then connect it to the edge of the other side, just like we did for the first mermaid skirt we cut out. So you just go ahead and place this on another fabric and you cut out the other side of your skirt. That is just it. Then after cutting it, you can now place your front pattern on the skirt. Go ahead to join it up. So if you have any question, please go ahead to ask.